Our trip was made from March 19th to April 27th in 2001. It was 40 days and 2,700 miles through France, Italy, Austria, Germany, and back to France. We spent a week in Paris, and through the magazine Budget Fremers Travel, we were able to get a room 2 blocks from the Louvre for $40 a night. So that magazine was very valuable. But when we were going to go to the Louvre and all of the interesting governmental areas in Paris, the government workers went on strike. And so, we decided we'll get in a car and hit the road. So this is our first trip. We started out in Paris, went down to the, it was to Paris, Versailles, Chablis, the French Riviera, Saint-Tropez, Genoa, Pisa, Perugia, Florence, Assisi, Pompeii, and then Venice. We thought we would start out at sea level and in a temperate climate. And here we were in the city of Venice. Now, I don't know if many of us really realize that Venice is an island, and there's a causeway from the main location. This is a detail of Venice, which shows the Grand Canal going through Venice. We're going back to Venice, and this is a boat bus. You pay a fee, and you could travel on this thing all day. It stops at various points of interest, and it's just a great trip. We're on the boat, and we're passing under a bridge. In the background is the Church of San Marco, which is one of the highlights of the trip. And these are onlookers over people that are looking at the water at the boats below. And I think I know this person here. This is the Church of St. Marco. Very, very elaborate. As you can see, there's artwork on the face and a number of spires. And it's in a big courtyard, which is surrounded by various shops and interesting places. From Venice, we go up to Innsbruck. This is the city or the mountain at which the 1976 Olympics were held, up on this mountain here. And as part of it, the Soviet Union won 27 medals, East Germany 19, and the U.S. 10. The Soviet Union really stressed this kind of thing as kind of broadcasting the fact that the Russian people and the Soviet Union were top people. This is a view as you enter Innsbruck of the mountains. This is the main street of Innsbruck. Now we have gone up in a gondola up to the ski chalet in Innsbruck. And this is the town of Innsbruck from that chalet. These are pictures of ski boarders. They're hard to see, but the interesting thing was that they use ski boards about 5 times as often as skis, which I thought was most unusual. This is a shot looking through the windows of the ski chalet. Our gondola waiting to take us back to Earth. The tower holding the cables from the gondola, as you can see, and we're coming down. Again, coming down the city of Innsbruck from the gondola car. And we're approaching the ground. From Innsbruck, we went to Füssen, Germany. And in Füssen, we had a bed and breakfast, and this was taken outside our window. A stark contrast to what we saw in Venice. Another view, and I thought that the ice and the snow made a beautiful pattern in, this was in Füssen. After Füssen, we went toward Neuschwagen. And some of you know what that is, the royal castle of King Ludwig II. This is the road to the castle at Neuschwagen. I don't know if I'm pronouncing these names right, but this is the castle of King Ludwig I. The entrance to the castle built by King Ludwig II. Now, King Ludwig, he built this. It's extremely elaborate, very costly. He built it with his own money, but he borrowed a lot of money from banks to finish it. This is the entrance. Another view of the castle. Now, this is a view from one of the windows. And in the background, in this ravine, I don't know if you can see that bridge. Very interesting view in an interesting area. One of the windows, can you imagine what it costs to build a window like this? Now, this is lake. Now, King Ludwig II of Bavaria, his younger brother was declared insane. And so they suspected him of having a problem. He was a very handsome man and was scheduled to be married to a princess, but at the last minute he declined it, and it was expected that he was gay. But anyway, after considering the amount of money that he spent on that castle and the amount of money he borrowed, they thought he was unfit to rule. So therefore, he suddenly ended up at this lake, in the lake, allegedly drowned. However, the autopsy found there was no water in his lungs. We are now leaving the castle, and we took the easy way. These are horses taking us down to the parking lot. From the castle at Neuschwagen, we went up to Augsburg. And in Augsburg, we saw this beautiful church. It was really gorgeous. The cemetery in the rear of the church, all individual plots. The interesting thing is, do you see any grass? There's no grass. A clock tower on our way. Most interesting clock tower I've ever seen. The top one is for minutes, The bottom one is for hours. 2 clocks to tell the time. We are now in Wilteague, I guess. And this is, I was impressed with the ironwork in this particular church. Beautiful. We are now on our way from Augsburg to Dinkelsdale. The town gate of Dinkelsbühl, right? And it was a walled city, as most of the middle-aged cities were, because there seemed to have been constant warring. And this was one of the gates to the city. Now, virtually every one of these cities had a tower. And there was a watchman in that tower which would look for any invading or foreign forces that were approaching them. The interior of the city of Dinkelsbühl, and I thought this contrast of houses was very interesting. Basically, the exterior was stucco, and you can see they didn't waste any space. From Dinkelsbühl, we went up to Rothenburg. And here is Sue in Rothenburg. Very interesting city. And it had a very number of interesting places. However, we could not, in the interest of time, we couldn't show them. From we then went to Heidelberg. Oops. Whoops, double whoops. This is the street scene in Heidelberg during a rain. And this is a Lutheran church that was undergoing renovation. It was very interesting. One of the things that disappointed at least me in Heidelberg is how I enjoyed the musical The Student Prince, which I think we are all familiar with. And it took place in the University of Heidelberg. Well, the people at the information booth were, I thought, the only ones that we ever ran into that were fairly rude. And because we did not want a first-class hotel, we were looking for a bed and breakfast. Well, we got one in the adjacent community, but as a result, we never got to spend any time in the city or to visit the university. In a park, there were these sculptures. I don't know the background of them, but they're kind of interesting. We're crossing the bridge over the Rhine. Very interesting bridge. As you can see, it's divided. It's and it looked like it has 3 lanes in each direction. We have crossed the Rhine, and we are now living in French territory, and this is in the city of Seltz. Now, street scene of Seltz, very similar architecture. Seltz is in the part of France called the Alsace. Now, the Alsace and the Lorraine were annexed by Germany when they invaded France. And the French never forgot this. So at the Treaty of Versailles, they had very harsh terms for the German people. And arguably, it bankrupted the German government, and arguably brought on World War II. This is the church in Alsace, and when we were there, the people found that we were Americans, and we were really welcome there. The interior of the church, and again, windows by Marc Chagall, the French artist. This is a rape field. I don't know if you're familiar with rape, but it's a strange name. It's a seed from which canola oil is made. And there were a number of these fields in France. And canola is number 3 oil after soybean and palm oil. We saw a number of these same rape fields in England. From Seltz, we have gone over to Hatton. And the reason we went in that direction was to visit parts of the Maginot Line. And the Maginot Line was built in the 1930s. And the French were concerned about another invasion by Germany. And so what they did was to build this line along the German border, with the thought being that the Germans would have to go around it, and they would meet the Germans at the end of this in case they invaded. Well, what the Germans did, they outflanked the whole thing and invaded through Belgium, through the Ardennes forest, which made the Maginot Line basically a relic. The other thing about it is the French spent so much money on this that it took away from their normal armaments. And so the French army was, well, somewhat depleted. They took off the concrete. The concrete is gone. It's about 8 or 10 feet of concrete, and here's a doorway down here. And into the Maginot Line. I don't know where that plane came from, but my son tells me it's a MiG. A MiG being, of course, a Russian plane. From Hatton, we went to Metz. And this is the Metz Cathedral. And this is the interior of it. And again, the windows were designed by Marc Chagall. In the basement was this dragon. And I wondered what it really was. And as it turns out, it's a dragon called Gruli, and theoretically was vanished by the sacred power of Saint Clement. It became the town symbol of the city. From there, we went to Verdun. I was interested in going to Verdun because it became it was one of the major battles of World War I. And it was really a costly battle. This is a indication. This is Fort Douaumont in Verdun. And the idea the Germans had was that they would attack the fort, cause the French to counterattack, and then they would annihilate the infantry with their big guns. And they had big guns. It's reported that the noise from the gun could be heard 90 miles away. They had huge guns. And this is Fort Vaux, another one of the two major forts of Verdun. This is Fort Vaux overlooking the Loire Valley. Verdun is along the Loire River, and the attacks came from both sides of the river. A view of the emplacements at Verdun. And as you can see, they all overlapped each other and they covered each other. The battle was fought in 1916, between February 21st and December 18th. The strategy of having the French counterattack never worked because the fields were so muddy that they couldn't move the armament. And by the time the French understood what was going on, they moved up reinforcements. And after the Germans captured these forts, the French recaptured them, and it went back and forth. The total estimated casualties were 377,000 by the French and 337,000 by the Germans. One of the longest and the most costly, deadly battle in the history of warfare. It was considered a French victory because it stopped the German offensive, and because of the German losses, the Kaiser sacked the general in charge, Fulkerin, and the Kaiser installed von Hindenburg and Ludendorff to take over. I don't know what this means, Dave. We have power trouble. Okay. And here is a photograph of the trenches that remained around Verdun. French cemetery at Verdun. The American cemetery at Verdun. The Americans came into the war late, and they completely drove the Germans out of that area, and the Germans retreated until they had to sign the Treaty of Peace. These were American casualties, or deaths really, and a great part of them were Marines. Marines considered the one of this is their biggest successes. This is a photograph of a grave marker of a person from Wisconsin. The memorial at Verdun to the American forces. And here is an engraving of all the people that were in the cemetery. And it could very well have been maybe the background for the memorial in Washington. When we were in Verdun, a man came up to us and said, "Would you like to stay at our bed and breakfast?" And we said, "Yeah, sure." Well, anyway, this is the entrance to it. He did a tremendous job in building. It's a beautiful place. This is our bedroom in the bed and breakfast. And the courtyard. He built all of this himself. It's really beautiful. And well, it was really the dollar was king, remember, and everything was relatively inexpensive at the time. Now we are going to Reims. Now, Reims Cathedral was the location of which all of the French kings were crowned. It was considered the major cathedral in the country. And here's the front of it. very, very similar to Notre Dame in Paris. The interior. Okay. Tell you what, let's discuss this just as soon as we're done. The interior of that church. Now, here is a very interesting and controversial figure, Joan of Arc. She was born a peasant. She was born a peasant and they didn't have accurate records, but she was reputed to have been born in 1912 or 1412, excuse me. And she was executed by the British, burning at the stake in 1431, at the age of 19. Now, the reason she is so popular is that the two, you might say, the dauphins for the French throne were the Duke of Burgundy and Charles, the son of the reigning queen. Now, the Burgundians teamed up with the British. The British saw this as an opportunity and started to invade France. And they were very successful. And they were ready to break through at the city of New Orleans to go into southern France. And it's alleged that Joan of Arc got a vision. And she got a meeting with Charles and asked if she could lead the army. They got her armaments, and he did not know whether to placate her, mostly she thought that she would be for morale, because if there was a woman in front of the French forces, then this would be a morale factor. However, she apparently turned out to be a great tactician. And she relieved the siege of New Orleans and followed through with a number of victories against the British and the Burgundians. And finally, the French forces were victorious. And in one of the battles, she decided that she was going to be the last one to leave. And before she left, she was captured by the British. The British held a trial. And at the trial, they did not follow British court laws. She did not have counsel, etc. Well, anyway, they found her guilty, and she was burned at the stake at the age of 19. She was, of course, revered by the French and was canonized by the Catholic Church later on. She probably one of the most famous women in all of history. From Reims, we've gone to Paris. And Paris, because we could not go visit the Louvre when we were there before because of the strike, we decided we wanted to go to the Louvre. And so this is the courtyard of the Louvre. And this is an entrance that was designed by the architect I.M. Pei. Very interesting. It's the entrance. This is what it looked like from the outside with the entrance. And at ground level. And you can see the detail of the glass pyramid. The most famous painting in the Louvre, the Mona Lisa. And it's a little painting. It's really relatively small. And this is a complete gallery of Italian Renaissance paintings, including large paintings by Da Vinci, by Michelangelo, by Raphael, and all of the great Italian Renaissance painters. And I asked the question of the guard. I said, how did France end up with all these Italian paintings? Well, he said, well, you know, Napoleon invaded Italy and brought back a lot of the art. And I said, well, it was reported that the art was returned. He said, well, at that time, art was not documented. And many of these paintings remained in France. A statue called the Lovers. Now, to go back to get some facts on the Louvre. The Louvre contains 380,000 artifacts of art, and it displays only 35,000. So if you wanted to see all the artifacts in the Louvre, it would take you at least a week or more. Just a fascinating. It is the most visited museum in the world. This is a view of the Seine River taken from the Louvre on a cloudy day. Statues of French kings, which are on the facade of the courtyard. Our favorite eating place. This place was it was in Paris. It was run by Sri Lankans. And the bread was a whole grain bread, just delicious. We ate here constantly. Also, with regard to French restaurants, in the Champs-Élysées, there are a number of restaurants. The most busy restaurant there was a McDonald's. One thing about McDonald's we found to be very interesting. You can always find a washroom, and number two, you can stay there any length of time to meet somebody, and nobody will bother you. You could not do that in French restaurants. So we decided that we are going to visit, to stay in a French area. And we went to a town called Noiselle. This is our bed and breakfast in Noiselle. And guess who's peering out the window? This is us with our Peugeot. Now, the reason we got this nice Peugeot is that we picked it up in the afternoon in Paris, and all the inexpensive cars were gone. So they had to offer us the next car, which was this very nice Peugeot. This is in Noiselle. This is the City Hall. And this is a statue of a person that built a chocolate factory in Noiselle. And, of course, because it employed a lot of people, he was pretty famous. Interesting. Have you ever seen anybody carry a load of pipe by hand with a hand cart? You can see the guy is lugging it. This is a street in Noiselle where the trees were just beginning to flower. The cemetery in Noiselle. Again, beautiful artwork. Individual plots in Noiselle. This is this is interesting in that not only is there a marker indicating the death and the birth of the person, but stone tablets depicting what the person's profession was, what the person, what their hobbies were, what they did in life, etc. And you can see that each one of them shows a different part of their life. Never saw that anywhere in any cemetery. This is the River Marne. Now, the reason I talked the River Marne was that in World War I, the Germans were attacking, and they had free reign. They were just making great progress. And the Marne is very close to Paris. So the French were alarmed and quickly set up a defense. And a number of soldiers were in Paris on leave or on some kind of duty. And the alarm went out, and the French soldiers came to the defense on buses, on taxi cabs, on anything they could muster to stop the Germans. And it was very effective because the Germans were pushed back from the Marne and no longer gained any territory toward Paris. We are now back in Paris, and this is de Gaulle Airport in Paris. And here's our bus to take us home. And here we are traveling from Paris to Fort Myers, Florida, where we live. And this is French, Italian, and German.